The second you buy into this thinking that we're victims of circumstance is the second you give all agency away. We are back with Chapter 6, Yoga of Meditation. And meditation is a term that today, it's as broad as the term of sports. You could be saying the word meditation like you'd say the word sports, and you got tennis in your mind. The other person you're talking to has basketball. There is so many types, forms, iterations of meditation. But this chapter is the most classical of meditation, dhyana meditation specifically, which is single-pointed thought to the exclusion of all other thoughts. That's the last step before realization. This chapter is kind of a culmination, as the previous chapters have woven together action in wisdom, action in knowledge of the self, kind of in this tapestry of weaving these together and telling the right seeker to find out which one are they most conducive for. Are they introvert, ready for knowledge? Are they extrovert that need to chew through, burn off a whole lot of karma through action? And that is a self-inquiry that we are all called to do. But no matter who someone is, it is always still a combination of the two. It's just a matter of proportion. But as you weave them together, as you go further and further up to the higher planes and subtler forms of knowledge of the self, subtler forms of action, and an example might be choosing inaction as a form of action. Those also serve, who stand and wait, which we talked about in a previous episode. Maybe that's a form of self-mastery and action that only a very developed version of yourself can do, versus where we might be right now, where it's a lot of compulsive action. Well, as you go up to subtler and subtler action and knowledge, eventually get to the last step before realization, which is meditation. And this is what chapter 6 covers. But meditation has a massive misinterpretation around the world. Even in the East, according to classical Vedanta, it outlines meditation as the result of practice. It is not a practice. The ability to focus one's thought on a single point of reflection to the exclusion of all other thoughts. This is not to discount the value of sitting still, focusing on your breath, sitting still, contemplating. Maybe you even have a mantra like TM, our dad, taught us. Transcendental meditation, he taught me at 8. And it was all about calming the mind so that you could do better in sports, which is so hilarious of a reason to pick up meditation. But that type of approach to meditation, that might be therapeutic for the person that needs some stillness. In fact, nearly anyone that is compulsively acting will find benefits in the first 30 days of sitting still. But the goal is, as Ram Dass so famously put it, the goal is freedom. The goal is not to be a great meditator that sits down for 20 minutes each day and does it for 50 years. The goal is freedom. And if meditation is the takeoff of the plane towards waking up, towards realization, if it's the takeoff, then spending all of the time necessary to take the iron bars of desire out of the plane, to take all that dead weight that would just make it sit on that runway, that would require a 50-year runway, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day of a practice, quote unquote practice, and it never actually takes off. If the goal is to be free, then 49 years, 11 months, 29 days spent taking iron bars off to then have 10 minutes of a takeoff to be free. That is the prescription. Again, if the goal is to be free. That takeoff, that meditation, that final step is the result of practice. The three practices of Vedanta, as we mention quite often, is question everything, don't take anything for granted, study, reflect daily. There are other practices like Shravana Manana, Nididhyasana that are part of the holistic approach to waking up, listening, reflecting, and experiencing. Actually waking up. That is listed as Shravana Manana, Nididhyasana. That is absolutely critical, but the daily practices that anyone listening to this can start practicing within minutes of this episode. Cultivating a sense of questioning. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? Why have I followed this path? Why have I listened to these people? What do I want? What do I say that I want? What do I really want? Questioning and cultivating that aspect of questioning and not being someone following the herd. Practice number one. Then not taking anything for granted. Triumph or trial, not taking anything for granted, and then practicing a daily study, reflection, ideally before the sun comes up, of anything. It could be St. Augustine, it could be Gospel of Luke, it could be Vedanta Treatise, 2 pages a day. And then reflecting on it, because listening is nothing without reflection, contemplation on whatever you've listened to, whatever you've read. But all of this is summed up in my favorite verse from chapter 6, verse 5. This is summed up, all of the practice, the whole approach to the philosophy, summed up in verse 5. Let man lift himself up by himself, let him not lower himself. His self alone is his friend, his self alone is his enemy. You are the maker of your fortune. You are the maker of your misfortune. How freaking counter is that to the world that tells us, you're just a product of your environment. You're a victim of circumstance, especially our modern culture that is all about rights. Has nothing to do with duties, but all about you got to fight for your rights. People owe you something because, you're in this situation because you've been a victim of X, Y, Z. Holy hell, is that disempowering? The second you buy into this thinking that we're victims of circumstance is the second you give all agency away. Because by definition, if you're in this state or you feel this way because of some force outside of you, at any moment, the force can get stronger, can get worse. So how would you invest in a mentality of agency, of capacity to change your inner state, if at any moment a shoe could drop and boom, things are even worse than they were before? Let man lift himself by himself, not lower himself by himself. Self alone is his friend. Self alone is his enemy. As Muhammad said, the greatest jihad is the conquest of oneself. It's the hardest thing to conquer, ourselves. Yet there's no one else that can do it for us. You can have the best trainer in the world, they can't build your muscles for you. You've got to lift yourself up. And as scary as that might seem, feeling like, no one's coming to help me. At first blush, it is scary. It is quite different than what the world tells us. If we band together, we can make this happen. This savior politician is going to save the world I live in and make it all better. That never happens. Ever. That has never happened. The lighthouses throughout history that we revere 2,000, 3,000, 1,000 years later, they didn't set the world right. But as you sit with this, as we sit with this concept, I can't think of anything more empowering than being told, you have the capacity to lift yourself up. That is your natural birthright, to lift yourself up. Your natural state is to not only lift yourself up, but is to be far more elevated than you might even think. To be told that you have more capability than you ever thought possible. That is the great news. As scary as it might seem in the beginning, this is the most powerful of notions. That you have it all within you. And as Swami will say often, when you lift yourself up, you lift up the world. You start waking up earlier, you start devoting yourself towards improvement. Watch what happens to your household. You go out for that run when you feel like total shiz. What does that do to the spouse that is also contemplating improving him or herself? You do the right thing without any intention of being an example for your coworkers. What does that do? Lift ourselves up, we lift the whole world up. So it's not just empowering for some inner battle we might be fighting, that you have the capacity to lift yourself up, but it is the most empowering notion of all, in that you can lift up the entire world. That's what this philosophy says. You can lift up the entire world just by doing what you ought to do. And that is your natural birthright, your natural capability to do just that. That is today's reflection on the daily Vedantic. Tomorrow we will tackle chapter 7. We'll see you then.